Well, thank you very much for coming back from the break. I hope you checked out the rest of the conference. If you stayed here in the break, then that's good. You'll be prepared for a little treat. We have PatH, who is a Canberra local, who will be speaking about abuse of trust, exploiting our relationship with public repositories. So let's give him a warm welcome.
Cool. G'day everyone. Thanks for coming. I was going to make a joke about how there's way too many people in this room, but at least half the people have nicked off, so that's great. So thanks to them for ruining the start of my talk. G'day. My name is Pat. So I'm a low-level programmer during the day, but when I like to stick my head above the sea level, I'm a Python developer. And so today I'm going to be talking about the software supply chain, and I'm going to cover there we go. I'm going to cover basically what this is and basically how malicious users can basically exploit the concept of modern software development. All right, and then I'm going to sort of go about what can we sort of do about this. Now, a quick note is I am going to focus on Python and pipi, which is the Python package repository. But all of the concepts I'm talking about, like, this is systemic in modern software development as a whole. It's not specific to this particular language. And I'm particularly going to point out things that happen in other languages. But as a general rule, everything that I'm talking about is going to be possible in basically every other software language. So first off, what do I mean by the software supply chain? Well, look, modern software development is hard. And I'm not just saying that just so I earn a bigger paycheck. Like, it's a very difficult thing. There's lots of moving parts in modern software development. If you're building web apps, you have to target multiple different browsers across multiple different operating systems. You have to deal with the differences between computers and mobiles and tablets. You often have to plug your software into other systems, such as third-party authentication servers. So there's a lot of very complex things that that are involved when it goes to creating a modern software app. Right? So say, for example, you want to create a web app, okay? And you want to create an app where you show people pictures of cute dogs, and you ask the customers to guess the names of these dogs. We're going to call it the Dog Guesser 3000. Right? So you might think that you're going to spend all of your time when you're developing this app working on really interesting and fun stuff. But in reality, what actually happens is the majority of code that goes into your app, it's going to fall into one of two buckets. Okay? You're going to have the easing and boring bits. So these are the parts that every single web application has to do. And you end up doing basically the same thing from every app. So these are things like, hey, how do you make a web request? Right? How do you draw an image on the screen? Okay? Well, like, these are the sort of things that you do time and time and time again, and they're not really that interesting because they're not really the problem that you're trying to solve. Okay? And then the second bucket is that really hard bits can go really, really wrong. Okay? These are things like the user authentication. How do you keep user data private? Okay? These are things that, if not written by experts and audited by experts, things can go really, really badly. And this is a really, really bad thing. Right? And so therefore, if you're not that expert and you don't want to spend your time doing the boring bits, what do you do? Right? Well, so the community and the open source community is really, really great. And it turns out there's lots of libraries out there that take a lot of this pain away, that have already implemented a lot of these parts of the application. Right? And so you can just take these libraries, you can use their code inside your web application, and therefore you can spend less time doing the bits you don't want to do and more time doing the bits that you do want to do. Right? And so this is really, really great. But the library developers also have this same idea. They also have the parts of the library that they're interested in writing, and there's other bits they don't want to do. Right? And so they themselves have their own dependencies. And what you end up doing is this really complex chain. It's really more like a web of dependencies and codependencies and interdependencies. And without realizing it, you might not even really know exactly who's written all the code that you are using inside your application. Right? You might not really know where that code has come from, how well it's been written, how well it's been tested. And you might not even know some of the names of these, because they're dependencies and dependencies and dependencies. And normally this is OK. Normally you can just go and go live your life. But what happens when one of these dependencies goes bad? Right? Are you going to even know about this? And what could happen if one of these dependencies goes bad. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to go through a hypothetical scenario here. So we're going to talk through a hypothetical scenario of how this can go bad and what that could mean for you as either an app developer or as the end user of a product. Okay? So we're going through a hypothetical scenario. There is a company out there called Cool Corp, right? And Cool Corp's accounting department really loves using Python. They like using it so much that they really love using this Python app called Big Money. Okay? And Big Money exists in the PyPy packages, and so every day, the people in Cool Corp's accounting department download the latest version of this app and use it to do whatever accountants do. I know it involves money. That's about the extent of my knowledge about what happens. So we are going to play the evil people in this scenario. Okay? And what is going to be our goal? Well, our goal is going to break into Cool Corp, and if doing CTFs has taught me anything, it's that every organization out there has a secrets.txt sitting on their desktop. Inside of that, there's going to be a magical hash, and then inside of that is going to be something that's really, really important to someone. Okay? So our goal is going to be to attack Cool Corp, jump onto their desktops, and steal their secrets.txt and exfil that out to our own purposes. Okay? So what do we do? Well, so first off, we're not going to attack Cool Corp directly, and we're not even actually going to attack the app that they use. Okay? What we're actually going to do, we're going to look at that app, and we're going to see that there's actually a library that app uses. It's called big-lots-of-money. Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to take over this app. Okay? And so how are we going to do this? Well, so with Python packages, and this is similar to all the other open source software, is these are written by people in the community. These are people who are sharing code, want people to use their code, and want people to help them improve it. Right? So in these packages, they list information about how you can reach them. Okay? So often you find in Python packages, you're going to find these people's names. You're going to find their email addresses. You might find links to their home pages. And some people sort of go even further than that, sometimes without even really knowing it. And they might put up links to their Git repositories that contain private SSH keys to their servers that they didn't necessarily realize that they'd made that stuff public. They also might put things there, such as like links to Confluence pages that they haven't locked down properly. These are things that if you look in PyPy today, these are the sorts of things that you're going to find. Right? So if we wanted to target this developer with a spear phishing campaign, so we wanted to send them a crafted email that would trick them into handing over their credentials to PyPy, we have a lot of information here to go on. We have a lot of information that we could craft something very, very specific to that developer in order to trick them or potentially even convince them to giving us their credentials. Okay? Now, once we do that and once that's successful, once we've got their credentials, there's a really slim chance that developer's even going to know that we've done that. So PyPy has no multi-factor authentication. It has no notifications listing that you've logged into their account. If you push up a new version of this package, they're not going to know about it. So there's a lot of issues here where if we gain control of this package, the developer's not really going to know about this, and let alone the developer of Big Money, and let alone you being Cool Corp. So once we can modify this package, what are we going to do about it? Okay? So we're going to be actually extra crafty here. We're not actually going to change the library itself. Okay? Because maybe we think, hey, maybe either Cool Corp or we think maybe Big Money, it checks out whenever we push, whenever a new version is bumped, checks out, sees what the code does. Okay? So we're not actually going to inject any malicious code inside this application. But what we're going to do, we're going to make our own package and just slide that into this complex dependency web. And then our own package is going to be the thing that actually contains all the malicious code. Right? And so from the perspective of Big App, they don't know why this dependency exists because it's not their application. All they know is one of the things that they use now requires something else, and they don't know why, and that they have no reason to sort of suspect anything suspicious. And again, Cool Corp's sitting right at the top of this. They're extra not going to have any clue. They just know that something got bumped to a new version. So we can do this, and we have to publish a legacy version, file version with Python. So modern Python packages don't. So modern Python packages, you can install them, but they don't run anything unless you explicitly call them. But if we were to publish a legacy version of a Python package, what we can actually do is we can add some extra code that says, hey, while I'm installing, go do this other thing. And we can make that other thing be whatever we want it to be. So we can do that. So we don't actually need anybody to call our code directly. As long as we're in that dependency chain, we have code execution, and we can do whatever we want there. So we publish this legacy version, we add that as a dependency, and then whenever someone goes to grab the new version of Big Money, we have code execution, and we can run whatever we want, and we can run on that user's system. Now, I've called this a legacy option, but in reality, there are hundreds and hundreds of legitimate packages out there that do this, that do run code as they're installing. Typically, it's things like setting up shortcuts, or sometimes it's actually compiling some code onside the user's system. So even though this is a legacy thing, no one has any plans to actually remove this functionality. So this functionality is going to exist for a long time. Now, in other languages, this is also possible. So if you're using Ruby or .NET, this thing is absolutely possible. And in there, it's not even a legacy system. It's just something that you can straight up do. OK? And then the final thing to notice about this, so if we have code execution, we're now running inside CoolCorp servers. Yes, we're not running as like a domain admin or that. We're just running as generic, boring user from accounting software. But if we remember our goal, if our goal is to steal secrets from the accounting department, we don't need domain admin. The information that we want to steal is right there. And we don't really need to go any further than that. So the fact that we're just running as this user on their local machine, that is completely fine for what our goal is in this scenario. So we've now got the scenario where we've injected our dependency. CoolCorp has downloaded the latest version of this application. We've got code execution, and now we're running on the user's machine, and we've got their secrets.txt. How do we get that out, right? So if this is sort of a diagram of what we've done so far, so we've uploaded the malicious packages up to pipi. That's gone down through CoolCorp. They've downloaded the new version. We're running. That's really cool. But you might sort of think, well, look, if we just were to take that file and just punt it straight off to our evil server, well, look, there's a chance that either the firewall might block that connection, or your intrusion detection systems, they might notice, hey, this regular user from the accounting is reaching out to this domain that I've never heard of. That sounds like something dodgy going on, launch an investigation, right? So if that doesn't work, well, why don't we just go back through pipi, right? So Python packages, the way you submit them to pipi is just a web request. It's a web request that really isn't that dissimilar to when you download a package, right? So unless you're looking under the TLS, the network paths to and from, going from pipi to upload a package and downloading from pipi, these are going to look really, really similar. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to see that network flow and just completely dismiss it as someone's just downloading a package, when in reality, it's actually gone the other way around, right? And the pipi domain, it's one that you've already trusted, because you've already trusted your users to download this package, right? So you've already trusted this domain. You've already trusted the certificates these domain presents. And so what we can do as a malicious package, well, we're just going to re-upload ourselves. We're going to bump our version, repackage ourselves as a new package, except this time we're going to package the secrets.txt inside of us, and then just push us up to pipi, right? And then us from our evil server, we can just connect to pipi and just pull it straight from there, right? And then if we wanted to do something different, we could bump the version again, put a new sort of task in there, and then we've basically got this complete C2, this complete command and control system using these legitimate servers. And again, if the CoolCorp networks are not paying attention, they're going to trust all of this traffic, right? So we've got this complete sort of flow here, right? Now this is a hypothetical example, but so how real is this? Okay, so actually, this sort of attacks, this has happened already in real life. Okay, so in November of last year, there was a Node.js library called EventStream. Okay, now this attack is actually absolutely wild, right? So instead of spear phishing, so what is so EventStream is it's a library that gets used similar to the libbigmoney. It's a library that gets used in a lot of applications. Okay, it has millions and millions of downloads every single day. So it's a pretty popular library. Okay, but the author of this library, they didn't really use it that much. They'd moved on to other projects, and they were keeping it alive, but they weren't really that interested in it. And what ended up happening is the author of this library got approached via email and from someone that said, hey, I've noticed you don't really care about this library that more. I use it every day. Why don't you let me maintain it for you? And the library developer didn't have any reason to doubt this, that they had their other projects, someone was genuinely interested in it, and they ended up just handing over the credentials to Malta, this library, and to maintain this library. Now, it turned out that this was a social engineering attack, and it turned out that this was a malicious user, and what this user did is exactly what we talked about. They injected a dependency into the web, which was their own malicious JavaScript that did a bunch of wild, crazy stuff, but it really ended up boiling down that what ended up happening was it was targeting a specific application that managed Bitcoin wallets. And so whenever users used that application, it would download the EventStream library. Therefore, it would download the extra malicious package. And then that malicious package would steal all the credentials to harvest all the coins from that Bitcoin wallet. Right? So these are attacks that are happening in the wild right now. Okay? And when it comes to Python, although we haven't seen this specific attack, there are absolutely been malicious packages that people are all the time clearing out from PyPy. So these are things that are happening in the world. Okay? So now I've spoken about the things, what can we do about this? Okay? So there's a couple of tools that can help us to mitigate these sorts of attacks, to try and help us and protect us from this. So the first one is PyUp Safety and JFrog X-Ray. Safety is a free product. X-Ray is a paid product. What these do is basically they go and map. So if you're a developer, they go and map all of your dependencies, and they give you a really useful graph that shows you just all the different packages that your library depends on. And apart from being pretty eye-opening, because you'll see quite a large number of packages in there, what they also do is that they check that against a database of known bad packages. Now, typically, these aren't necessarily malicious packages. What these tools are mostly looking for is if there was a library that has a vulnerability in it, and that vulnerability got patched, and then they bump to a new version, well, if you're still depending on that old unpatched version, these tools are going to tell you about it. So this definitely makes it useful to see if you're relying on these bad packages, but their focus is all on this sort of already known bad and known fixed packages. This doesn't really do anything. It doesn't do any sort of code analysis to look for any malicious code. Okay? So then on the other side, you've got PyCQA's Bandit. Okay? And this is looking at code. And so what this actually does is it takes the code, passes it down, breaks it all up into the abstract syntax tree, and this looks for odd and bad code. But sort of again, the sort of point of this tool, it's not for looking for badness. It's more looking for if you as a developer have done something wrong. Okay? So if you as a developer have written some code that does something unsafe, that's what this tool is designed for. It's designed to protect you in those situations. But what hasn't yet been tested, and it'd be interesting to find out, would be if a malicious user wanted to try and find ways around this. Python being a dynamic language, it's not designed to be protecting against an actual malicious user. It's designed to be only finding sort of things that you've accidentally done something wrong. And then sort of on top of this is lots and lots of packages get flagged by this tool. Okay, I downloaded, I think it was the top 2,000 packages off PyPy, and the top 1,000 all threw like high warnings, which was their second highest level of, hey, this package is doing something it shouldn't be. So like, even though this tool is going to be really, really useful, you're going to have an absolute mountain of false positives if you're attempting to use this to look at code that isn't directly yours. So on top of all of them, so really the best thing in these situations is to really do basically like a full source code audit, right, of all of the code and all of your packages. But that's really complex, like that's a lot of time, a lot of complex time. And so like if you're a small team, there might be thousands and thousands of lines of Python code there that you might have to review to check for anything dodgy. You might not have time for that. Or what if you're a student, right? You're a student that might not necessarily know what bad and malicious code looks like. So what do you do in these sorts of situations? Also, what if you just need to solve a problem once? You're not making a production system. Like a bunch of times when we're doing CTF challenges, there comes across a puzzle that there's a package out there that has a solution. But once you solve that puzzle and you get that flag, then you move on with your life. You don't need that again. So are you going to do full source code reviews for something that you might only need for 15 minutes, if that, right? And then even if you are looking at a production system, well, what if you're comparing a number of different products? Are you going to try and do a code review on every single one before you determine if one of them is worth going down or not, right? So in these sorts of situations, the tools they are useful to have, but they definitely have their flaws in terms of those targeted malicious attacks. And the source code audit, it's unlikely to happen. So if only there was some sort of way where we could take the code and just chuck it in a bubble, right? And we can just chuck it in some contained environment, and we can let everything there from installation, code running, all of that could happen in that bubble, and none of it's completely segregated from the rest of our machine. Okay, so this is what containers are, what Docker containers are. The sort of problem up until now with Docker containers is, unless you really know how all this stuff works, it can be a bit of a pain to spin up and test them, particularly if you're just wanting to run a project once, or you're really just trying to focus on your app development and not on systems administration. So I would like to introduce to you a tool that I've been working on recently called Dawkins. Okay? What this tool does is it makes it really easy to take Python code and run it inside these containers and protect your system while making it really simple and easy to run the code and actually get the information you want to get. So what Dawkins does, it takes all of the packages of everything from the install to the running of the code, and it puts them, builds Docker containers, segregated Docker containers, builds the containers, runs them, and then it just spits out the and then it spits out the text input. Okay, so what happens is you can very simply go, hey Dawkins, create me an environment. Hey, and install this package that my friend told me about recently. I think it was called Drongo. It was Drongo, one of them. So you build me an environment and install Drongo inside of it. Okay, and Dawkins is going to go and it's going to build you this environment that's segregated from your machine, and it's going to install that package inside of that container. Then you can just go, hey Dawkins, run this script over here. And it's going to take that script, throw that inside the container, and it's going to run all of that, and then just spit out anything that comes out. And if it's got any input, ask you, for any user options and that sort of stuff, then it'll ask you. And so Dawkins will create this bubble around all of this Python code, and and will protect your, and it'll completely segregate your system. And the Python code, it's not even necessarily going to even know that's running inside of this system. Okay, it's going to see an operating system, it's going to see a user, but it's not going to see your user. It's not going to see your passwords. It's not going to see your sensitive information. It's only going to have access to what it can see inside of its own bubble. So how does this protect us against all of the attacks that we were talking about? Right? So it prevents the code running on your machine. It's going to run inside of that bubble, particularly at that install time. So on top of this, the containers that everything runs in as soon as we're no longer running that script, that gets all shut down and blown away. So if it attempts to install any sort of persistent backdoor, well, that stuff gets blown away and no longer exists, and certainly isn't running on your machine. Okay? And then also, even by default, we even actually completely block the ability for it to write any files inside of its own bubble, or even connect to the internet. Now, if you require them, the tool can sort of let you do that. But so by default, the package can't do anything outside of what it is executing and has no clue what is happening outside of it. Okay? And so if we imagine our secrets.txt sitting on our system, there's no way that it can even read that file, let alone even know if that file exists. So I've made this tool, and I really think it's really useful for those scenarios that I was talking about. For those times where you've just got a quick problem you want to solve, or you're just doing some testing. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for a production environment that requires production solutions, because the problem with this sort of solution is if you are putting this in a production environment, well, production data is customer data, and customer data is sensitive data, right? So at some point, the tool in production has access to information that is potentially sensitive, right? But so just for testing and for development, where you're not actually giving it any sensitive information, I really think this tool is going to be really, really useful for those sorts of situations. Now, when it comes to production, nothing is going to beat that full source code audit. But for anything less than that, this tool, along with the others, are going to be really, really useful. Okay? So what have we talked about? So we've talked about the software supply chain, and we've talked about how really complex this can be, and we've walked through the hypothetical and shown the real attack of that can occur on this without as end user really, really knowing about it. And we've really gone to show that without fully understanding what all the code depends on, you really leave yourself vulnerable to these sorts of attacks. We've also covered that, so there's a number of tools out there, now including Docker, but Safety, X-Ray, and Bandit. We've talked about there are tools out there that can help developers and can help users to understand exactly what code is being run, but they still don't necessarily help against these sort of targeted attacks. So, okay. There we go. So I'm putting DocEnv up on GitHub. It's already up there if anyone's keen. Besides that, does anyone have any questions? Because I'm short on time. Oh. Yeah, sure. Oh, are we? Yeah.
If this software is malicious and installs a backdoor or something, in that container, you'd be able to detect that fact and make some kind of indication. I mean, could you extend this to make it able to give some kind of indication whether the software was bad or not?
Cool. So the question was, if the code is running inside the container, could we do some detection to tell what's going on? So at the moment, no. The tool is designed for just essentially making this quick running the code. However, it actually does a really, really great idea, and that is something I'm definitely going to look into, because in theory, yes, it should be quite simple to do. So what you could easily do is we essentially could just chuck something underneath Python that just keeps track of any files that get written, any network calls. That should be something that's actually fairly straightforward to do. So I will actually think about doing that. So.
I think we might have to leave it there. If you've got any more questions for Pat, grab him after his talk and ask him there. But let's thank Pat for a great talk.
Cool.